Hey y'all, it's Bart, and welcome to another episode of Soccer for Us. On this episode, we are going to talk about the newly installed manager of the U.S. men's national team, Mauricio Pochettino, and his press conference he gave with the U.S. soccer executive team to the media last Friday. Now, before we get that, I have two favors to ask you. We are recording today on September 17, and that is National Voter Registration Day. So do me a favor and go to vote.org, check that you are registered, and if you need to update or register, go ahead and do that. Also, my birthday is this week. Woo! I'm turning um, I'm turning something that is slightly significant. It's not quite a milestone, but it's like in between two milestones. And if you feel so compelled, please support the podcast and support me by going to buymeacoffee.com/soccer for us pod. Now, to talk about Pochettino, his statements during the press conference, and where he might be able to achieve some of the goals that he laid out in said press conference, is the foremost historian of U.S. soccer and a man who probably can actually tell us about Bora Militovic in his time as U.S. men's soccer manager, as mentioned by Pochettino in his press conference. It is Thomas, aka U.S. Keeper. How's it going?
It's going well, Bart. Yeah, it's Bora was in his time he was a huge hire. I mean, probably doesn't get the level of Ponch or even Klinsmann at the time, but he was huge, and people don't realize what he did. He took teams to the World Cup. He got out of the group with those teams, right? And that was a big deal. And it was three different clubs. I think it was I don't know, Costa Rica, United States, and Mexico. Maybe not in order, but he did it. He did it consistently, and he, he was no nonsense. He had a way of doing things, and um, he was going to do it hell or high water. And he made some tough choices. He made tough player cuts. Of veterans that were in the the 90 World Cup that just missed the 94 World Cup. He snubbed a few players. Jeff August was a player that was considered a snub at that time, and you know, Casey Keller also, was a keeper that was in there. I mean, so he made tough choices, and we're gonna see Punch potentially do that, and fans are gonna just have to kind of roll the punches and trust it because there's not a lot of time between now and the World Cup for him to evaluate, put whatever it is in place that he plans on doing.
Well, you mentioned that Bora was a huge hire. We obviously, during our time in the the modern era of U.S. soccer, we saw Jurgen Klinsmann get hired, and now we're going after another international. I will say that since my time basically on this earth, the U.S. has only had three truly international managers, um, and we get another one, but this one, to compare him to the Klinsmann hire, this one comes with real coaching success to his name. Not so much playing, that's fine. But as a manager, Mauricio Pochettino brings a good resume to the table for the U.S. men's national team. And to me, that is more important than just being a big name. But the fact that he's proven throughout all this stuff that he can get players to play better. If we can forget about Chelsea a little bit, no one can figure out how to make that team good. But that to me is a big deal that he has good coaching acumen and a good coaching record. And I think that's why he's a little bit more like Bora, and the fact that maybe not the most prolific player, but as a coach, an incredible record.
Yeah, I mean, look, take all the club hatred aside for the clubs he's managed, and look at it through the lens of just what he is able to bring to the men's national team, right? Like fans get locked into that a little bit, like of not wanting a certain coach, but his resume is pretty much everything you would want in a manager. He brought Tottenham to the Champions League final, and that's the team was good, but they overachieved, right? They overachieved to get there, and some of it's luck with the draws and all those sorts of things, and you give them credit, but he's collectively going to be able to do this. I mean, the only piece he doesn't really have, again, is that international experience, but that doesn't he's going to just have to figure out how to navigate the windows, navigate the little time he has with these players to be able to put in what he wants to put in to do that. And I think his resume is a solid one, and I think it's a great hire. It's probably the best hire we've ever had in terms of on paper, and
Mhm.
we'll have to see how it plays out, on the field, because that's really where it's going to matter next, right? How it comes.
Yeah, I
How
think
about
I want to hit on my biggest takeaway from the press conference, and then I want to hear yours. But mine was the fact that the man came here to win. There was no beating around the bush, and he said it not just our goal is to win the World Cup. He said that again, and in a sit down interview with Raj from Men in Blazers, the goal is to win the World Cup, and obviously I think he understands where this team is and the amount of work it would actually take to achieve that goal. But as he said, if you don't believe you can do it, then it's not going to happen anyway. And if you don't believe you can do that, then why can't then you're not going to achieve even lower goals, right? Like, well, if you don't believe you can win the World Cup, then why are we even saying, oh, well, we're going to get out of the group? Why are we going to win the next round? Why are we going to win a knockout game? Those things come from believing you can win a World Cup. And that was the biggest thing to me. And it was said with both confidence, but also um, a little bit of belief. He believed, as he said, that we can do that. And if you don't believe you can do it, if that's not your goal, then it won't happen anyway. Um, and I think that to me is setting a standard that, quite honestly, and I hate just comparing the most recent guy, but that to me is a huge contrast in the standard that the guy before him coached to.
Yeah, I think the standard that you're bringing up is an excellent point, right? We've heard these standards in terms of what the expectation are for the U.S. during qualifying on the road, right? We've talked about it before. His standard, he's already coming in saying his standard's higher than what was already there, right? So to me, like, he realizes that this group is probably not meeting even its potential right now. This group has more inside them. He's clearly evaluated the roster. He wasn't going to jump into this without really knowing what it was. It seemed from everything that he did his research. He had his thoughts about how he wanted things run, and when they were doing the negotiating, which I think really speaks a lot into the character in the passion that he has as a manager. And he's not going to put up with it. He's not going to listen to fans. He's not going to listen to US soccer. He's going to make the choices, right? He's going to make the decisions. And you know what? He's going to make some tough ones. We're going to see players that we biasly like probably not be on this roster, you know. And he's no nonsense about it. He is very direct in that sort of way. He's going to make tough decisions. I can tell you, there are going to be fans that question it, fans that don't like it, including myself. I mean, I'm a huge Matt Turner fan, but he pretty much said, there was a tone to everything leading up to this where players have got to be playing with their clubs. Well, I'm sorry, Matt Turner, like, you're in a tough spot, because if you're not playing, you're probably not going to be on this roster, right?
Right.
And maybe there's an exception with goalkeepers. I don't know, but it's clear that 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 level of play needs to be there for these players, and there's going to be no longer any excuse for that.
What was your biggest takeaway outside of that then?
I mean, just the manner and just everything about it, just the professional, just his aura in general, right? It's kind of refreshing to see that control of it, right? The no nonsense type of thing, just the confidence that he brings. And he has the experience. He has, that next level soccer IQ that no American manager has. I'm sorry, they just don't. They can't see it. He has a vision, he has a plan, and he's really just, he I think he has some great ideas already in play, because I think he's already thinking in that
Yeah.
manner. So I think he's already two steps ahead, um, in terms of that. And you know, the October window is going to be wild.
Yeah. Let's chat about that real quick before we dive deeper, because I think fans need to be a little. Now he would refute me on this, but I do think fans need to be a little um, gracious with the exact amount of success we're going to see immediately. Right now, he doesn't want to make excuses, and that is a point I do want to talk about. But look, we're not going to score. We're not beating Mexico 10-0 in Mexico in October, right? Like let's not think that this magically makes us, you know, a top 8 team in the world, because as you and I have talked about, the talent is what the talent is for this team. That said, what I heard from him is going to immediately change the product we'll see on the field, because he expects this team to compete when they get in. And that is the key word. He said, "You're not here to play, you're here to compete."
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. Like he made some reference. I can't remember specifically, but friendlies are not, they're matches, and you go out there and play them, right? So again, that sort of mentality, that sort of standard, you know, off right out of the gate is huge, right? So, look, I yes, I would love to win in Mexico, but I think we have to be somewhat patient too, a little bit with what he's trying to implement and how it's going to go. Like we do have some, we do have some time, and that's the thing. We have some time for these things to be rolled out, for these things to kind of to figure out. I'm hoping he's going to be simplistic in that his tactics that he rolls out, because as we've seen, I don't think this group really is capable of any sort of like complex tactics to roll out in a 9-day window, at the what 10 or 11 you have before the World Cup, with a Gold Cup thrown in the middle there. Like you just have to set realistic goals and expectations in terms of that manner. But the standard, I mean, it's huge. And see, in players, to me, I'm getting a little frustrated because they're kind of talking out of both sides of their mouth now. They're like, well, this is what we've always wanted. Like, well, okay, but I understand why you wouldn't say that when your coach is there, but you could have, like you guys welcome, you know, Berhalter back with open arms,
Yeah,
and
wanted
now
him
you're
back.
right wanting them back. Why? Because it was easy. Because buckle up, because this isn't going to be easy, and this is it's not going to just be getting buddies getting together and hanging out for 9 days. This is going to be business, right? And well, should it be, because there's a lot on stake here, when you look at hosting a World Cup in the United States, because I hope I see another one in my lifetime, but
Yeah.
and it could be another one in 30, 40 years, but you know that's down the road, and I think this is the opportunity for a number of reasons to do this. And U.S. Soccer made the right hire, and they're all in terms of doing that. And the window, we got to be patient with that. He's going to have to look at players too. I'm sure there's players he wants to see with whatever core group he feels is their core group, right? And and kind of see what it is. But he's not going to put up with the Tyler Adams injury stuff. Playing him, Weston McKennie in shape. Tim Weah attitude stuff. He's not going to put up with that crap. You know what I mean? He's just not. He desk when his red card, like those sorts of things. I just don't think he's going to put up with. I mean, I don't care how good you are. I mean, he's going to put players in the best position to succeed. I really believe that.
Yeah, I think when you look at the goal, as you mentioned, isn't I mean, look, he said his goal is to win the World Cup, and that's a great on-field goal, right? But we're talking a little bit too with this hire about the off-field impact. And we have a World Cup, which requires, I think, to maximize the impact, it requires a good showing on the field, right? You saw the impact that um, the Japan Korea World Cup had in 2022, with specifically Korea going so far, but the way that those two teams kind of kicked off a true generation, and then some, of soccer players in that country. And we've seen, especially Japan, become a real force in international soccer. We didn't see that with Qatar, but maybe for the best. Um, but U.S. soccer had that moment in '94, right? I think we would both agree that without the '94 World Cup, we are not sitting here today talking about Mauricio Pochettino coaching the U.S. men's national team. So the impact, though it needs to be seen on the field, to be felt most off the field. The impact of this hire is about getting fresh eyes, getting new philosophies, getting a new intensity into the program that trickles down to the rest of the U.S. men's national team program and men's soccer development in this country. That's the goal. Really, I mean, that is the goal.
Yeah, and it has to be because I mean the thing it hasn't been working. I know the U.S. has been reluctant to bring in non-Americans, and I don't really know why. Um,
We ain't got
but
that great coaching talent. I mean, that's the thing.
right, I mean that's the thing. Like we like it's okay to be coached up by someone, right? It's okay to have that standard. Like this whole thing of like, oh, a men's international manager has never, only been a domestic to the country that's won them, won the World Cup. Fine, fine, but that doesn't mean that always has to be the way. So, um, and again, I think this brings eyes to it. This brings excitement to this. It's a big hire because it does so many different things for revenue, for interest, for people talking about it around the world, right? So it's going to be a national, it's not just a national thing, it's going to be a worldwide thing when you talk about this and bring that attention to American soccer. So it's going to be next level. And and that is going to help bring that again, that next generation, right, of because I'm part of that generation in '94 that loved it, watched it, and now I'm, my daughter's playing it, right, and my nephews are playing it, right. So like it all flipped over, and all those parents do it now. Can you imagine what the rollover is going to be,
Right.
in another 20, 30 years with the next generation on top of that in terms of the bodies in there and the interest and eyes on the game? It's going to be hopefully it's not going to be as big because that's we've come a long way, but you're going to continue that wave going, and I think that's important for U.S. soccer, now. And I think now they're on board with it, right? Now they're
Yeah.
excited about it, right? Like it's like okay, we kind of got forced into it almost a little bit, and because I think they wanted to keep Berhalter, but now that they're in it, they're like maybe
Yeah.
this is right. Like now they're seeing already the impacts of just what little we've seen with this, and I think that's
Yeah.
exciting for them.
Well, I say that I more come from the generation of the Women's World Cup from '99 when I was 10 years old, so I was able to fully take it in. And I was playing soccer at that time, but that made me fall in love with the sport, right? That made me want to do this, for lack of a better word. And that to me is kind of the other thing that just really struck me from this press conference. His quote about trying to, find examples of winning and taking examples of culture. And he said one of the most important things that we need to aspire to is the women's team. We have Emma, who is the best coach in the world, and the women's team in history won everything. We need to match you. And he pointed to Cindy Parlow Cohen. And it's like, why men's national team coaches not said that before? Because you can talk about the differences between the men's and the women's game, and there have been some. I mean, it's not fully the same, but it's still soccer. You're still playing the same sport. But the difference has been that the women's team goes out there to every camp, every match, when they're back home with their club, when they're practicing in the off season, thinking, how am I using this to help me win a World Cup?
Right. But again, the whole thing is they're very much treated differently, right? Like I followed it just as probably as long as you
Right.
have, right? Since mid '90s, right? And so, but they're different standards for them, right? Like the women, like like they've had their ups and downs, but I mean, but they're always there though. They're always there. They always have this winning culture. They all, they have a hiccup, they rebound, and they go win the gold medal, right? Like they figure it out. They find out, again, there's a motivation thing when you win a lot. Sometimes you get complacent, right? So, but again, that culture, you're right. Like why haven't we talked about this? I mean, you're talking about an international team that has 4 World Cups, five gold medals, and is going for their fifth World Cup in a few years. Why can't we use that as the standard? Like build off that in terms of just how they've able to do that. I mean, obviously, the talent level is at a higher world
Right.
standard on the women's side than the men is, but there's a lot there just mentality wise that they can take and bring to the men's national team. I love that he did that because like you know it's not a competition. We're going to be cheering on both sides of it. Sometimes it just feels like they were fighting one another over the last
Yeah.
decade, and like why? Like
Yeah.
they're both for the U.S. We can root for both. They can both win and be successful.
Yeah, and the women's team specifically has the advantage, I think, to an extent of building. I think a lot of them is kind of like the Brazil, obviously the success, but like they created what it meant to play the sport. When you think of how soccer is supposed to be played, you often think of those Brazilian teams who were winning World Cups. Um, and I think the U.S. women kind of did that, obviously, by winning early on, but they've also been able to find and continue to have that success because of the mentality, because of the culture that has started from 91 when they first won the damn thing till now. I mean, 2023, there was a lot of questions about the culture, and it just seemed like the culture was still there. It just wasn't able to fully manifest. And then you brought in Emma Hayes, who was able to tap into the culture, add some better structure to the actual play, lift up some players with some coaching up as well, and now you're back on top. And that's where I really hope that Poach can help these guys elevate their game with the national team because we've watched this team for a while, and this is one of the things we can talk about is, you know, we watch guys at their club level ball out. Weston McKennie scored again today for Juventus. Christian Pulisic's had a hell of a run for AC Milan the past, you know, year and a couple months. Um, and then they get to the men's national team and they just do not we don't see that success. Johnny Cardoso been playing well for his club team for how long, and then he gets to the U.S. men's national team and has stinkers, and the real test for Pochettino in the like long term to help us win that World Cup to me is how do you help these players maximize their talent, maximize their potential on the national team level? Because I do not think that the dude who was here before that was doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the predictability of what we saw over the last 6 years or whatever it is, right? Like it became bad. We start, in the last window, right? The predictability was there. These players are almost like this is what I have to do in this moment, and like overthinking it, right? Like let them
Mm,
be free, let them be creative on their own a little bit, right? Because you don't have, I mean, you want to have these players have certain frames. You have your role, your responsibility, but like you don't want to have to say, well, we got to do 7 passes in a row before we drive forward to the attack or whatever it is. And that I think that's where Ponch has to have a different philosophy
yeah,
in terms of that. Like you have players that are creative, Reina, Pulisic. I want to see you have quality strikers, Balogun, Pepe, Sargent. Like I don't want to put these players. They're not been put in play positions to succeed under the last,
yeah.
manager. And I think that's the key, right? Like, is Ponch going to put these players in positions to succeed, right? Where they're strongest and get the most out of them, which again gets the most out of the team.
He said specifically to that, we are flexible. We're a coaching staff that wants to play good football to convince our fans to join us, which I love. The aesthetic is important. We want to play nice attacking football. But then he closed it by saying, what's more important now is to find an idea that fits everyone. And I think that helps me believe him that he maybe is okay with going from club to country, right? Because I think what he just said there is to me, a great goal for the U.S. men's national team. We need to play better soccer. Like, I think that's fair to say. Like, the thing about Berhalter is I wasn't disagreeing with him that we need to be the team that should be right, the team that uh, should be able to possess the ball, to pass the ball. But Berhalter was dogmatic to that approach, right? So yes, we want to play good soccer. We want to be attacking minded, but you have to put a game plan out there that's going to make every single player, not just the 11 on the field, but the guys on the bench too, better individually and better together.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think he has the soccer IQ, the soccer mind to, I think, understand where that's going to work, and and how he's going to be able to move the chess pieces, because I think that's going to be critical, because we saw very different teams when a player or two were off, the field. What I mean. Last 6 years, like when you had the group on there against the right team and the right formation, yeah, it was great. But then when there was a little bit of a challenge and adversity, how did they respond? And they, and sometimes it was for the better. We saw against Brazil, they kind of woke up, headed into Copa America, but then they kind of fell back again. So like the motivation, these players have accountability in this too, right? And so and it goes hand in hand with the coach setting the standards along the way. Players, these aren't just friendlies, as he said. They've got to go in there and they've got to be ready to, show up, produce, you know, make a statement, right? Like we're not just going through the motions here. Like you're trying to build the team, you're trying to, do these sorts of things, and he's not going to be able to. You can't have any more hiccups. You just can't in terms of that. Like you're gonna have, you're gonna have hiccups in terms of like where you go across, the where you go across, to get to a certain point. But that's the journey. It's not being lazy now. You've got to, you know, come in, give your full effort.
So one of the big questions that I think faces this coaching staff and the team is you you don't have a whole lot of time for the next World Cup. Um, you do have a CONCACAF Nations League tie coming up in November against some team subpar that we should absolutely dominate both home and away, and then hopefully you win that and you're in the finals in March. You do have Gold Cup next summer, but we both know that those CONCACAF matches are not super competitive when you're talking about the players on the field, right? The talent that you're facing. But something that I think, and this is one of those like, why haven't we had a Argentinian or a Latino manager before? Because one of the things that they always do to level the playing field against us is play with passion, play with ferocity. And, so you're going to have to find a way to instill your plan against teams that are not as good as you, but are coming out to give you their best shot. And this goes in hand with what he said about we don't have a whole lot of time to prepare. And he said, we're not making excuses. We do have enough time. But he, to your point, said, when I was a player with Argentina, whether it was a Copa America, World Cup, or friendly, it was the same. It was to go show you are the best, win the game for your country. That's what it means to be competitive. And so that's basically his answer, right? Of, well, yeah, okay, we only have 10 international windows before the World Cup, but if you go out there and you give it your all, if you fight hard, if you try to make this about winning the game, then that timeline gets compressed because we're not building a damn project, right? We're not trying to build an arc out of instructions from who knows where. The goal is to win a World Cup, and to do that, you have to win the game in front of you. And yeah, you're going to have some big picture stuff, but that was to me something that was such a different tone than what we've heard under Berhalter of a dude who felt like everything was a freaking test and not like, oh, a test of endurance, a lab experiment. To hear Pochettino come out there and say everything is battle, everything matters, there is no such thing as a friendly, as the example of we're not making excuses for having a short runway. I'm hoping the players understand that and buy into that because if they don't, they're not going to be successful, period, let alone at the World Cup. But that is the mentality that I think we've been lacking.
Well, it is. We see it on these just road matches in general, right? Outside of Concacaf, right? I mean, not. I mean, on the road against Concacaf teams, and so like we just the performance, again, you can make whatever excuse you want in, field conditions, environment. Look, everyone has to play in the environment, but you have to be better. You have to be better. Like that's what's going to make this team stronger and better. And was they go down to Mexico and have a hell of a match and get a draw or even get a win, that's awesome. Same thing. They're gonna have a Nations League match on the road in November, another one. So you're gonna have two windows where you have two CONCACAF road matches, and those are gonna be the tests, right? Because we can see this team blow that team out 6-0 at home and then go down there and lose 2-1. And you're like, well, what the hell happened? Like, 4 days later, like, did they, you're clearly the better team. You're just now on the road. Like, so what's the mentality? Like, with the players and how the coaches making the adjustments, right? Like it's not the first time we've seen those sorts of results and then at home and then fall in their place 3 or 4 days later and not get the result that this team should be providing. And to me,
Right.
I've had this issue for a very long time. He's got the right mentality. I just don't know if the players do. I'm a little
Yeah.
concerned with that based on what we saw last window a little bit. Um, I'm hoping they get excited. I'm hoping they sense the urgency too, and they sense that what, I'm gonna have to show myself when I have my opportunities because you may only get one or two.
And that's another thing that he talked about. And there's a little bit of a ruthlessness with the club coach because you can kind of cut players and buy players and all that stuff. You obviously do not have that luxury with the national team, but you do have a player pool to pick from. And I think that is the perspective he's coming in with. His quote about it kind of was to every single player that is around the world, we are going to try to pay attention. They have the door open. And now, obviously, as we have discussed, look, Christian Pulisic is still the most talented player in this national team pool. Gio Reyna is still a very talented player, maybe number two, right? But to your point about Turner, buddy, if you're not showing it week in and week out at your club, how do I know I can trust you to do that for my national team, right? Gio Reyna, buddy, if you're not playing even for your club team, let alone performing well, how do I know I can trust you to do that? And that is the thing that is where the responsibility falls on the players, right? They can't just say, well, I'm really talented, so I'll get a call up. They need to go out there and perform week in and week out because Pochettino wants them to perform when they get here. They need to come ready to compete, to perform at their best. And
Yeah,
again, if you're not playing week in and week out, if you're not performing well week in and week out at your club, it's hard for me to believe you can then perform at the level needed for us to win a World Cup.
yeah, and I have to wonder, like, I mean, player wise, and look, and Reyna's had his injury issues, and I think that that's becoming a trend that no one's liking. But like, what accountability do the players have in terms of their preparation, right? I mean, they have to I mean, because I don't want to see. I want to see us have the best, every player healthy, and have to make tough decisions come the World Cup when you look at the roster selection, right? I want to see that. So I want these players to get their asses in shape, to get continue the form, and have the next 18 months and whatever it is, right? And just make sure you're ready to go. And then you make decisions hard for everyone and you're going to push for it. Because to me, the Reina thing, something's off there. Like he can't continue having these injuries. He's got to find a trainer or whatever it is and figure it out because he is too valuable when he's healthy and in form to not be part of this team, right? So, but but you can't rely on him. You can't rely on Adams. You can't, and you have to be able to find those combinations. And that's where, Punch is going to insert someone else in there and say, here you go. This is not your earned spot,
Yeah.
and you go in there and maybe they take it over or maybe they have to figure out another way around it.
It's going to be interesting because this team has been underperforming since Berhalter came back. I think that's fair to say. You can talk about the Nations League finals, but even that was a very concerning performance against Jamaica, who, by the way, we very well could be facing in the Nations League quarterfinal. Looking at that right now, it's Jamaica, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, and Guatemala. Like those are four teams that, especially Jamaica and Costa Rica, we don't really have a great track record there.
No.
um, and there that's what I'm hopeful that we will see very early on, right? It there are going to be some benchmarks that we'll be able to see in the early goings if this team responds to this sudden what we perceive as to be a sudden shift in mentality and expectations.
Yeah, I think I mean, this has to be that. I mean, and I think where we look at like playing Costa Rica, I actually want to see that. I want to see them go to Costa Rica because they've never won there, right? They've never won in Costa Rica, so like that would be a great opportunity, right? It's a tough environment, understandably, and to create those new standards out there. And I think these players need that. I think they need to find something to grab onto and get excited for. Because when you don't have to qualify for the World Cup, then it's a whole different mentality. I mean,
Yeah,
I think the timing of this works out though, because then it's like, okay, maybe you don't have to qualify, but maybe you got to fight for your spot, right?
right.
Because nothing's guaranteed right now for anyone, and
Well,
that's yeah.
that's a good point because, granted, again, Nations League isn't non-competitive, right? Like that is you need to go win those matches. You need to, and I think the goal, as Poch would agree to, and as you and I have wanted, you need to win both the home and the road match, right? That is not for negotiation. You need to then go win the CONCACAF Nations League final because you've won 3 in a row. You better hold that. And maybe Canada, but like Mexico certainly isn't at a level to beat you. Um, Canada, you know, because of a lot of circumstances, beat you in the last window. But that Gold Cup is another opportunity, and I'm curious what you think now with Poch in charge. We've seen, and this hasn't been asked, so I'm not sure. We're kind of speculating, but I want your inference, if you will, for what seems like a 2 decades. The U.S. men's national team has seen the Gold Cup, and especially now that we have the Nations League, the Gold Cup as a tournament that we don't have to put our best foot forward. Sometimes we win, sometimes we make the final, and that seems to be okay. I I think with Mauricio Pochettino, he will expect the best players to be available for that tournament, to show up, and to play well for that tournament, and hopefully win the darn thing. That seems to be his mentality. But I'm concerned that the U.S. soccer people are going, well, we had the CONCACAF Nations League, because we saw that this summer. We had Nations League, right? They had Gold Cup last summer, right? And they didn't prioritize them. I'm concerned.
Well, I think I mean I don't think there's any real choice on this. I think you have to. I mean, one, the window of time of this. See, and this is where people sometimes I think they almost I don't know Concacaf schedules. I'm sure, but like the window in which the Concacaf Gold Cup takes place is earlier. I think it's like June
Right.
1st.
It takes
So
place in March now. Right.
right. So you don't have a conflict between Nations League and that. So you're going to have your June window with 2 matches and then the Gold Cup. And I think the players have to be released, and I think you take your best, right? I know there's some conflicts with the FIFA World Cup, Club World Cup that's taking place in the United States. I know some of that is in place, but you know what? You still can you can still bring a pretty damn good squad to the Gold Cup, work through a tournament with them, because a new manager needs to be able to do that and go and win it. Right. And so there's still controversy if there's going to be other teams from other confederations in there. I think that's, would be nice. It provide a different flavor on that. Again, they're competing against another, big soccer tournament. I think they're playing right at the same time. So, but, I think you have to be
Yeah, it's
all
June
in on that.
15th through July 13th,
Yeah.
which is about the same time. They haven't officially released the Gold Cup, but that's the same window. Um, you know, Look, we have of the guys who might be in it. We have maybe let's see. no one. Oh, Dortmund. So and Juventus are um, part of it. So that maybe could affect things, but that also take, takes into factor how serious are those clubs going to take it. I'm not.
Yeah, yeah. I have no.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
don't know.
I mean, it's the first one. It's the first expanded one, I believe, right? That they're doing.
Yeah.
So
Yes,
it's a
it's a
massive.
32 team. So,
Right.
like Juventus qualifies. They haven't really done anything that requires like that earned that. But I mean, like obviously that does Dortmund and Juventus are teams that our guys play for. But one, Gio Reyna, I think reportedly Gio Reyna is still under contract at Borussia Dortmund. That's yet to be confirmed by Visual Sight. But I'm I hope that we are prioritizing that. But I understand that if Wes and Tim and Geo can't make it, that does affect things. But to our other point, that means that other players have to come in and compete and win a starting job.
Yeah, it's opportunities for some players, and I think that's good for a coach to have a different, those different
Yeah,
opportunities too, because he will see them. Um, yeah, I don't know how they negotiate the release of the players for that tournament. I mean,
I don't know which one takes precedent or whatnot.
yeah, but
Yeah,
technically they have to release for international duty for
yeah,
tournaments, is my understanding, unless there's some weird loophole in that. I don't, that
yeah.
impact. And again, it impacts a small amount of players for the U.S. for sure. I don't know what other countries, how
I
many.
mean, it would affect Mexico because they have a lot of their players play domestically, and they have multiple clubs qualified for the Club World Cup. Here at home, we really right now just yeah, we're not really pulling any guys from that now, and I don't see any in the future coming up. So hopefully,
Right.
hopefully it won't be an
Yeah.
issue for us. Hopefully
But
it affects Mexico
yeah,
greatly, and we get to stomp them like 17-0.
yeah, it's a priority though. Again, any of these. He's got to take every one of these windows and take
Yeah.
every ounce of it as you can.
Um. I, I don't really have a whole lot else from the press conference other than to say that there were look, all press conferences are going to be the same in the sense that the new manager coming in is going to say a lot of things, and some of that you can hold him to. Some of the things are just platitudes, but you know I, I liked that his standards were win, whereas Greg Berhalter was disorganized the opponent with the ball and changed the way the world sees U.S. soccer, which are not bad goals in theory, like but you change the way the world views U.S. soccer by winning matches, right? And I also heard from Pochettino a lot of things that, in my opinion, have been lost from the men's national team program. I think they called it grinta. I couldn't get a great translation. They weren't able to translate it, but it's grit, fight, determination that you bring to a game. And it's like that's what we've always played with. And again, it shocks me that this is our first. I think this is our first truly Latin American coach.
It is, and I was asking for one back in for the 2018 cycle. To me, I think it just brings a different,
And
and
here's the thing: there are plenty of Latin American coaches who also speak English. Tata Martino can speak English, right? He just didn't like to do it in press conferences because reportedly he's not as good as it, But if he needed to communicate ideas to players, he had a translator right next to him, but B, he could communicate one on one with players. He wasn't unable to speak English. And I'm with you. I don't understand why. I mean, obviously, Tata was the guy in 2018 that we kind of all thought was going to happen. But like, if you're putting out that they have to speak English, one, okay, well, you are limiting your opportunities, but not that limited because a lot of European coaches speak English. So the fact that we just never went south of our border to find a coach, shocking. This
yeah,
first
and
time.
there's so many good coaches down there that have been available in both of these, all three of the times that we've been looking for a manager, right? So
Yeah,
it is crazy to me that it's taken this long. Like really, it's
yeah,
almost like, yeah, it's crazy. So I mean, I'm very happy that they went this way. Hopefully, we'll see that. But to to one of the words you used before, and this is one thing we have definitely not seen from this group: grit, right? Like fighting tooth and nail.
Hmm.
I remember so many matches from the U.S. from back in the '90s and early 2000s, and for forever, right? Where they're the underdog. There's no chance they're going to win this match, and they just find a way, grind the hell out of it. It's ugly soccer, but you know what? They find a way and they get the win, right? Like these players are entitled right now. They've had
Hmm.
everything given to them. They're playing at high clubs. They're playing, in Champions League, and we're not seeing them put that same effort. They're just kind of coming in, seeing old buddies, and doing that. And I'm sick of that as a fan. Like to me, like they need to find that next gear. They need to be able to find and grind it out, figure out how to, figure out how to win against Uruguay in a match you need to win at home in Copa America and get that result, right? Maybe that result doesn't get you to the next round, but you know what? You gave it your all. You did what you could control doing, right? And
Hmm.
that's the key. And they're too much relying on just like, well, we have the goal differential. We're okay going on the road to Trinidad and Tobago. It's like, come on, like that mentality stinks. Like it stinks. And I don't think Ponch is going to allow that. I just don't. I don't think
Yeah.
he's going to allow them to do that. And these players may hate him for it, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay. You don't have to love your coach. You have to respect them, but
Yes.
that's the key. Right now, Ponch deserves that respect, and every one of these players will give it to him.
Well, I do. You mentioned about Champions League. Important to note that five men's national team players took the same field in the same Champions League game today. PSV Juventus. We saw Pepe come off the bench, but Tillman and Ledesma starting. Ledesma starting at right back. This is a great resurgence for him, and I think it's important to note that again when you talk about guys who could benefit from a new coach. I'm not saying Ledesma was off the Berhalter radar because I think obviously that was injury, but like he could benefit from having Pochettino say, "Oh man, look at this resurgence as a right back. Look at this kid playing right back for PSV, one of the most respected clubs in Europe. Maybe not the best, but a respected club. That's a guy who could take advantage of a coaching change. And it will be interesting to see which types of players start getting a little more preference because we saw with Berhalter some players who some player profiles, let's just put it that way, that he preferred, right? I think Paul Areola, I think Brendan Aronson, guys like that. So I'm interested to see what types of players Pochettino prefers.
Yeah, I'll be the one that's. I mean, I think the mid. I think we have a lot of depth and quality in the midfield. If they're healthy, I think I think a lot of that kind of you know chooses itself. A center back to me is one that I'm
Oof.
going to be interested because it's not deep. We've got some young center backs that are maybe not quite there. Jalen Neal. I mean, Weiner is playing pretty well right now for Benfica B team, and I know he's younger, but like, does he give one of these younger, center backs an opportunity? Because what we've seen recently from this group has not been great. Like it's been ugly, and
I mean, the dude is a former center back. Maybe he can help. I don't know. He
yeah,
played for Argentina in a World Cup. Maybe that'll help. I don't
yeah,
know.
yeah. I just to me, like I think that's the position that of like just concern. Like, does John Brooks get called back in? Probably not, but we always talk about it.
I
But
do think John is a little past the like, let's call him back, but I don't have a problem with it because,
yeah,
I
but
mean,
he's only in
shit,
his early.
you're still running Tim Reen out there.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, he's what, 5 or 6 years younger than Tim Ream. I mean, honestly, like, I maybe Ream continues. I just, I'll be curious to see, like, does Zimmerman get another call? And who knows? Like, he's 31. But again, I'm just saying, you just don't know, like, with what his mentality is gonna be. I mean, I would assume, you know, we'll see some of the same players there, but it's gonna
Yeah.
be
Again, look, the player pool is the player pool. I think you and I have talked about this. It's not like you can just go make a new player or buy a new player, but yeah, like, will he call back a Brooks or a guy who is more talented, but maybe hasn't been part of the? I mean, maybe he calls in Zach Steffen. Don't call in Zach Steffen. But I am curious because I think the goalkeepers is the position and the center backs are like those two positions are fully up for grabs at this point. So I don't
Yeah,
know.
I mean, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how he navigates that. Like that's going to be interesting because I think um, we're all wanting to see what combination he's going to throw out there, who he's going to put in general, because he's these players. Again, there's going to be some shocking omissions, I believe,
Yeah.
from some of these rosters. But again, he wants to look at certain pairings and groupings, so I'm not going to read a lot into it either, right? Until we start getting
Yeah.
into like, hey, Nations League's final, right? Then he's going to try to get his best roster out there.
Well, like we said, we have a match window in October against two teams that have given us fits recently, as a lot of teams have. Panama, and then as we saw with Canada, a team like that can really frustrate us. And then a team that we've had a lot of success against with Mexico. So I'm curious how this looks, because again, I don't know what to expect from a style of play. I don't know if he'll change a whole lot, but I do expect a different tone with which we play.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm excited to see it for sure. Can't come soon enough.
Any final thoughts on Mauricio Pochettino's press conference and now being in the head coaching role of the U.S. men's national team?
My only thought, and we mentioned this on a previous podcast, is it will be interesting to see if there are any dual nationals that are skill available that could be pulled in, right? In general, there are a
Yeah,
couple that we've discussed, whether he can, you know, convince, some of these players, because the one thing too, Bora was able to do, right, when he was manager, he was able to pull in a ton
yeah,
of dual nationals, right? And so, like, when you look at like the players he brought you know, in that 3-year window of time that he was there, right? It was massive, right? And they
yeah,
played 100 matches, and they had to get those players in there. The list goes on and on. And I don't know if there are any players of high caliber. There are a couple, but and how many that we could potentially pull in to help
yeah.
with the depth? Because that would be the only other option, um, to kind of modify the pool. There's not a lot out there. Again, a handful at the absolute most that would be the quality, um, to provide that additional depth, or maybe win a starter position. Who knows?
Well, they talk about October surprises in election cycles. Maybe we'll get an October surprise on the U.S. men's national team side. Thomas, thank you for joining me and talking about Mauricio Pochettino, talking about the U.S. men's national team. I look forward to talking to you more about this in October, probably a couple times before then, but it's really exciting.
Sounds good, Bart. Appreciate it.
Thanks everyone for listening. I'm Bart. I'm out.